actual company of the Israelites that left Egypt. Do you know how long ago Israel left Egypt? But God is speaking to them on the basis of that covenantal agreement that he made with Israel as a corporate people. And he was saying to these people that you are in the line of the inheritors of the covenant commitment that I made to your fathers when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. So that sometimes it will be very important for you to go backwards in order to frame your advance. Some of the weapons that you need, some of the totems for advance might be domiciled in some of the interactions that you have had with the Lord in the past. But these interactions were interactions that were had by a federal cooperation in the spirit. There's the, how do I explain this? All right. It is that Israel were descendants of the men and women that left Egypt. And when God came to them and God was making a commitment to them, that commitment was not just for the immediate people that he made it to. So when the Lord started to say to us as we got into this year that I'm sending you, I'm causing you to reap in fields that you did not bestow labor. All right, it is not for nothing that God is speaking on that wise, and I want to take a little time to explain that to you, because some of the things that God is bringing to us in the course of this season that we have entered, they are not just the result of the labors that we have bestowed. This is because we are at the intersect where the timings of God now overlaps with the calendar of men, and the human beings that happen to be caught at that intersect now become the beneficiary of the harvest that has now arrived. It is the result of the culmination of a cumulative process and progress that God began. The prophecies of God over Africa, the prophecies of God over Nigeria, and the totems that were delivered to our fathers, many of whom longed to see the day and they didn't see it until they crossed to yonder. The Lord God said to a people, according to the word that I covenanted with you when I brought you out of captivity, so my spirit is with you. That means that the presence of the Spirit of God in the midst of the people at such a time as this is in keeping with covenants that predates the people. That God is asking us to enter into inheritances that the groundwork and the framework was laid before you and I were born. And if we are entering into such a season, it is a season that must be entered with every weight and sense of responsibility that we are capable of mustering. Because the fathers and the mothers, the matriarchs and the patriarchs of Zion that labored in order to make infrastructure available that can carry such a day, they watch us from the grandstand. They are part of the cloud of witnesses. And in a manner of speaking, I can imagine that they are watching to see how we are going to steward the result of their labors, because we are the men and the women upon whom the ends of the ages come. And every time that God does that, the generation that is the recipient of this dimension of the workings of God is a generation that is privileged. Because this is privilege. Are you with me? It's privilege. It happens both in light and in darkness. It happens for good and for ill. The reverse of it is like what God said to Abraham in the book of Genesis chapter 6, chapter 15. That your children, your descendants, they are going to be slaves in a foreign nation, and the land into which they are going to go will oppress them for 4 generations. But after 4 generations, I'm going to visit them and bring them out, because the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. So God was saying, even though the land of Canaan is the land I promised to give to you, I cannot hand it over to you now. Because if I did that now, I will be violating the dictates and the demands of justice, judgment, and equity. These people that dwell in the land, they are filling the cup of iniquity, of their iniquity. But it is not yet full, such that I can bring complete judgment upon the land. Therefore, I'm going to send your descendants into another land, so that the Amorites can continue in this land piling iniquity upon iniquity upon iniquity upon iniquity, until by the scales of justice they now deserve extermination. And that's going to take 400 years. When the 400 years are accomplished and now they now deserve to be exterminated from the face of the earth, then I will go and bring your descendants from that country wherein they have sojourned for 400 years. The descendants of the Amorites, in whose day the cup of Amorite will be full, they will not be the ones responsible for the content of that cup as a whole. Yes. But they are the recipient. They are the ones that were caught in the intersect between the filling of that cup and the judgment that must now come. Jesus said the same thing. When he saw the activities of the Pharisees, he said, your fathers killed the prophets and you built their sepulchre. And that all of this is happened so that from the blood of righteous Abel unto that other man that was killed between the porch and the altar, that it might be required now at the hand of this generation. There was a cumulative picture in what Jesus was saying, that it's come to a head now in your generation. Now, what that happens in darkness or what that happens for ill, I'm saying that the same is true in light. That you can be at the receiving end of the culmination, at the receiving end of the overflow of something that has been building for 3 millennia. Of something that has been building for 5 centuries. That it could be that your measure was what eventually got the cup to overflow. But if your measure was all that there was, it would have been less than a drop in the bottom of that cup. But because of the labors of generations and generations and generations before you, we are simply privileged that God is handing over to us a season of the fulfillment of commitments that he made to our fathers. And if these things be so, what manner of men ought we to be? What manner of persons ought we to be? That you know that what is going to go to waste is not only the prayers you prayed. That's not the only thing that will go to waste. If you disappoint God, God is handing over to us the result of a cumulative labor. Saints, martyrs, and prophets, men and women that have hazarded their lives, and many of them paid the price of blood, but the cup was being filled and being filled, and they came and went. They looked, but they didn't see it, and they went over to the other side. And we coming long behind them, and now the people, a generation in a long succession of generation of God seekers. This thing did not begin in our time. If you are going to understand everything that God is going to release to us, you cannot look at only everything that we have done. No. No. And so God began to say that in this season, one of the needs that the church has is need for messengers of the Lord in the Lord's message. Like Haggai. People that can bring periodic perspective, periodic broadcast from heaven, progress report, encouragement, exhortation, so as to strengthen the hands of the builders and to equip the laborers as the need might be, to bring clarity where there is doubt, and to dispel any kind of question that may arise in the heart of people, to sap vital energy that should be deployed in the direction of the work. And so Haggai brought the word of the Lord again. So what you see in Haggai chapter 2 is the prophet of the Lord bringing the word of the Lord to the builders in the course of building. This was not when the project began. They had worked for 1 month, and then God sent Haggai again, say, okay, go and talk to them in this wise. And he now said, according to that promise that I made with you when I brought you out of the land of Egypt, my spirit is with you. Every time God does this, sometimes it can be very difficult to understand. Because if you do not know what is going on at the back end, you might think that God is being unfair at the front end. How can you give so much to such a little boy? You may not know. But if the little boy is an attentive follower of the God of his ordination, he would have heard things in the secret place that would permanently sober him and perpetually keep him in the place of humility. Because when God came to Moses, God said to Moses, the people, my people that are in Egypt are suffering. And the taskmaster is laying a heavy burden upon them. I have heard their cry. I have seen their trouble. Their tears, their cries have ascended into my ear, and I have come down now to deliver them. Then the next thing was very confusing. He said, therefore come. It was not the intercession of Moses that God heard. It was the cry of a people in Egypt that God heard. But here was God in another country bringing encounter to a man that the last time that man attempted to do anything in the direction of this problem God wants to solve was 40 years ago. Moses was the kind of man that had given up on the liberation of Israel, at least in his own lifetime. And he did that with every sense of confidence and self-justification. If you talk to Moses about that liberation movement, he will say, I have tried my best. In fact, if you have done half of what I have done to secure the release of Israel, then you can come and have this conversation with me. What did you do? He said, I killed an Egyptian for the sake of those people. Once upon a time, I killed an Egyptian to deliver an Israelite. It was the same Israelite when I came again to resolve a matter between an Israelite and an Israelite. They were the ones that turned against me and were ready to expose me. It was on account of Israel that I ran out of Egypt. Even God knows that I have tried. That's what Moses would have said. But here was God with this man. And God is saying, I heard the cry of my people in Egypt. That's why I am here in Midian. Because some of the things that will come upon some of us is in response to a cry that had been lifted to God out of Libya. Secret disciples who labored in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s, and they died not having received that which was promised. But the day breaks that God now goes into the ancient archives and the memorials of heaven to pull out things that were domiciled, many of them stored in ancient bottles. Because God said, the psalmist said, my tears in prayer, are they not all captured? Are they not collected in your bottle? But the seasons of God needs to collide with the times of men in order for things to break out. It is called the fullness of time. And that's the intersection that we are caught in. We are in that place that is called the fullness of time.